Good morning, let's roll. Okay, we ended off with Pasuk Tet Vav last time. Let's start off with Pasuk Tet Zayin, page 44 on the bottom. If you remember before, Shlomo Melech was talking about the concept of Beni, that was Pasuk Tet Vav, Beni atilech b'derech itam, mena raglecha mitzvotav, which means, my child, don't go on their way, restrain your foot from their path. Like we said, Shlomo Melech doesn't say don't sin, he says don't even start walking with them in the first place. And the Gra actually explains, the Vilna Gaon, that sin is not only about the action, it's about the road you choose as well. Right? That the point is that walking is already constant, it's already going with them. But by putting yourself in their area, that's already, you're going to cause that falling. And Chazal give us that principle that we said yesterday, Avera goret avera, right? One sin drags another one. That dragging really begins with any type of movement that you start with the sinners. That's already starting. And Chavetz Chaim used to say, when it comes to sin, prevention is 90% of the battle. Right? If you avoid the situation, you don't need to be a superhuman. You don't have to have superhuman strength later on because you already avoided the situation from the beginning. So now let's continue on Pasuk Tetzvav. That was Pasuk Tetzvav. Let's continue on Pasuk Tetzayin. He says, Ki reglehem l'ra yerutzu me'ara yishuch dam, which means, for their feet run to evil, they hasten to spill blood. Which means once a person starts down the wrong road, it doesn't stay at the walk, it accelerates on the run, as he says. And the Metzudat David used to explain that they don't just go towards evil, they run towards evil. It's not rational, it's compulsion. It's compulsive. And sin, like this, has this concept of the velocity. And think of an addiction, right? How does it first start? It never starts off, you think it's a choice in the beginning, right? And the 10th time already feels like it's a need. Alcohol addiction, in the beginning it started off as just like whatever. Same thing with cigarettes, same thing with any addiction. And the more time it goes on, it just feels automatic. Your body needs that constant need for whatever you have, whatever you're addicted to. And the Gemara actually says, the Gemara in Sukkah talks about this later on, you might see it, Jack, that at first the Yetzer Hara is like a thin thread, later on it becomes a thick rope. And this is exactly why the Torah says about Lot, he says, Vayelech Lot et Avram, Lot walked with Avram, but later it says, Vayeshev Besdom. First he started walking, then he actually lived in Sodom with all the people there. What does that mean? That you first start the walk, and then you actually talk the talk with those people. The idea is, like he's saying here, again, prevent the whole thing. The Pasuk here again warns that the end of this acceleration is violence, it's harm, it's broken, and maybe it's not bloodshed like he's saying here, but everything, like we said yesterday, will really lead to this concept of bloodshed, broken relationships, lost trust with people, and destroying the neshama of people. Next Pasuk Yud Zayin. Ki china mizora hareshet be'enei kol bal kanef, which means, for the net seems spread out with free bait in the eyes of every winged creature. Continue on to Pasuk Yutet. Vehem ledamam yeruvu yitzefenu lenafshotam, which means, but they wait in ambush for their blood and lurk for their souls. Now, this is really talking about the Yetzer Hara, but imagine a hunter throws a net in broad daylight, right? Any bird that has eyes will avoid it, right? Because only the foolish will really walk through that net. So too with the averot, the trap is really obvious. We've seen with the averot where they lie, where the dishonesty lies, where the greed lies, where all these things lie, but we always fall regardless because we don't prevent ourselves from the beginning. And the Rambam actually says, Rambam in Hilchot Dot says that wisdom means learning from what you see. For example, you don't need to touch fire to feel that it burns. You know that fire burns. You don't have to, my 2-year-old son, he always used to go fire, hot, hot, hot. And then one Shabbat, he touched the hot plate and he actually got burnt. And now he never touches it again because now he knows that the same thing with the Yetzer Hara. Once it actually hits you, that's when you actually realize that it's hitting you. But the sinner ignores reality. Why does the sinner ignore reality? Because temptation, like he's saying here, blinds the eye. It's actually a fascinating pasuk in the Torah. Parashat Devarim, it says, "Shochad yaver enei chachamim." A bribe blinds the eyes of the wise. And our rabbis are teaching us here something very, very subtle, that a bribe doesn't make a wise person less intelligent. It doesn't erase his knowledge, or his ability to reason. Rather, it twists his wisdom. It bends perception itself, and the mind is still sharp, but the conclusions become distorted. Because desire pulls the heart in a certain direction, and the intellect really then follows after the heart. And Rav Elchanan Wasserman, who actually Hashem Yikom Damam, who got killed in the Holocaust, he asks a powerful question. He asks that how is it possible that the most brilliant philosophers like Aristotle could ever deny the existence of God? If you think about it, with all their intelligence, with their ability to analyze the universe, shouldn't it be obvious that there must be a creator in the world? And he actually answers, he explains by actually invoking this pasuk, and he says the world itself is a bribe. What does that mean? People are bribed by their own passions, by their own comforts, by their own lust, by their own ego. And if they have to admit that there is a God, what happens? That means I'm accountable. Right? So if I have to admit now that there's a Kadosh Baruch Hu running the world, everything I do wrong, I have to pay for it. So that means that they can't live however they want. And that's why even the greatest mind can be blinded. It's not a lack of an IQ per se, it's the distortion caused by the deepest human weakness, which is a pull of desire. And we learned this even before multiple times in the Sefer, that the worst thing within a person is that desire for fakeness. And how does that work? The whole world, like we said, portrays a certain picture of what it means to be perfect. You have to have this vacation, you have to have this car, you have to have this house, right? You're paying for a car that you can afford to impress people that don't care about you. Why? Because you feel a lack of self-esteem within yourself. If you truly believed who you are and understood that you have your certain self-esteem, then you wouldn't care what people have to think about you. You won't get that fancy car because you don't need that car. You could have any car to drive to work or to go anywhere. But that's what he's saying here. The world will bribe you, and that's exactly how we learn at this pasuk. And this is really the what's going on. Come join us. This really is the tragedy that Shlomo Melech is warning us about in Mishlei, that even the wisest people can fall, not because they don't know the truth, but because the world around them is constantly offering this shochad, which is this pleasure, this honor, and this distractions that fog their vision of reality. And it's a reminder that wisdom itself is not enough. To see truth clearly, really, we need a purity of heart. And we've seen it all the time, that a businessman can take a shady shortcut because everyone is doing it, but then even though he sees others get caught, he thinks he'll get out of it. That's the shochad in the world. A person risks a marriage, why? For some sort of temptation. And then he's caught later on, and he doesn't realize that his family's gonna get shattered. A teenager, experiments with dangers, for example, drugs, whatever, even though he knows the statistics. Why? Because he says, I won't get there. I'm not gonna end up becoming an addict. Right? Most addicts end up starting off with one thing here and there and end up becoming an addict. And so the trap is really open here, and that's what he's saying. The trap is open, visible, and obvious, but the desire makes us act foolish, like the foolish bird here, that he sees the trap getting spread out, but he's still flying. So all of us are like that in this world, is that we have the trap in front of us, we have the Yetzer Hara in front of us, we have the desires around the world in front of us, but we're still jumping in that trap. And Shlomo Melech is saying here that don't even get there in the first place. Understand, put up fences like we said yesterday, to prevent yourself from getting into that trap. The second you're in that trap, it's already game over. Then he says, Pasuk Yudchet, V'hem l'damam yarvu yefutzu nefeshotam, which means, but they lie in wait for their own blood, they lurk for their own lives. Here Shlomo Melech really reveals the irony that the sinners think they're clever plotting against the others, but in reality they're plotting against themselves. The Midrash actually gives examples. Paro, Haman, Korach, right? Each set a trap for others, but yet they fell in their own trap. Paro drowned babies. What happened to him? He got drowned in the sea. Haman built gallows. What happened to him? He was hung up by the same gallows he built. Korach opened the earth against Moshe. What happened? He got swallowed up by the earth. Right? Evil backfires always, no matter what. And the same is true on a personal level, right? The liar thinks he's tricking others, but he ends up being untrusted, right? Tov Shem Ishem and Tov, even when he's telling the truth, because he already built himself a name of lying, even though he was telling the truth for the past years. The angry man thinks he's punishing others, but in reality, he's really destroying his own self. The greedy man thinks really that he's filling up his own pockets, but in reality, he's emptying his soul from life, right? He's just greedy. So the pasuk's message is really sharp, is that when you ambush another, you're actually ambushing yourself. So B'ezrat Hashem, when we're coming into Yom Kippur now, understand that this is what really life is about. Build yourself a greater Olam Haba. Have a great one.